Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As. So let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, I am close to reaching intermediate strength levels for squat and bench and deadlift following your novice programs. However, I've injured both my lower back and have a slight chest strain/tear. Would you suggest taking time off training completely to let the injuries heal? 1 to 2 months. I feel like I'm taking 1 step forward, steps back with my progress. Will I lose much progress? I'm currently completely unable to bench and experience lower back pain when squatting and deadlifting. Okay, when you're getting multiple injuries like this, it might be time for you to step back and assess, are you really using correct form on what you're doing? Now, you're saying you're close to reaching them, but you're injured. So you're not close at all. At this point, I'm going to say no, you don't need to take time off from training, but you need to spend a bunch of time building your low back up. You need to be building your low back up. High rep good mornings, hyperextensions, ab work. You need to start doing all that. Because it sounds like you're probably not. Number two, if you are getting these sort of pulls or injuries in your low back, have you been filming your form? Like, what does your squat and deadlift look like? This is something I stress to people over and over and over again. When someone tells me that they have good form on an exercise that they have never filmed in their life, you're by default lying to me. And you know how I know you're lying? Because you've never checked. In other words, that would be like saying, no, there's nothing in my closet over here. Well, I'm like, have you ever opened the door to look? Well, no, I've never opened the door, but I'm pretty sure that I feel like there's nothing in there. Okay, you lied to me because you don't have any clue. So we come back over to that point. If you haven't filmed these lifts and you think that you have good form, you are lying to yourself. Because you shouldn't be getting these injuries. What's your bench pressing look like? Have you filmed it? Have you watched my bench press tutorial videos? Have you watched my deadlift, even arm bend tutorial? Have you watched those, and does what you do relate to those? Watch my box squat video. Box squats will teach you how to back squat, by the way. Perfect carryover when it's done correctly. It'll teach you how to back squat. So I'm questioning number one. How strong did you get before you decided you needed more supplemental work? Because obviously your low back and abs are weak point. They should have been addressed as soon as you started getting any little nagging pains. Number two, when you're getting both back and chest strains, you need to be filming your lifts. You need to film your lifts because there's something is clearly wrong. All right, next question. Hey Jason, would you recommend that a lifter who wasn't competing in any athletic endeavors drop the dynamic effort method and just do more ILME/accessory work? Thanks. Not necessarily. I do that, but keep in mind I spent quite a bit of time doing speed work and doing GPP to build the work capacity up and do it that way because it's more specific now to my goals. Okay, doesn't mean that you should completely forego it. I think anyone who isn't fast and explosive already probably needs to do at least a few phases of speed work, even if it's just 6 months. Even if it's just 6 months. And realistically, it needs to be based on how you respond. What do I mean? I have a client, for example, who runs Conjugate, who we don't do speed work because he is insanely explosive already. He has always been explosive, probably has been explosive his whole life, seems to be very explosive in training. We don't do DE work for him at all. We don't do any. He runs Conjugate. He doesn't need it. He's fast. His sumo and his conventional deadlift are both past 500. He just hit a 425 box squat. He's probably about to hit a 440 squat. It's a guy who weighs under 200 pounds. I have another guy who we do speed work year round because he responds to it and thrives on it. Okay, the other guy's a dentist, by the way. He doesn't compete in anything. He just wants to be strong. He responds really well to speed work. So we do 2 speed days year round. And he gets stronger every month. He PRs on lifts every single month on a couple of lifts. Right? whether it's a sumo deadlift or a box squat or a bench or a floor press. He hits PRs still. And we do speed work year round. So it really is going to be dependent upon how you respond to these things. What I'm doing for me is a little bit different. And I think a lot of people could absolutely do what I do, right? If you have a high work capacity. Okay, if you have a high work capacity, you could absolutely do what I do at this point. Do the 4-day thing with max work and accessory work. But I'm going to say, I don't know, man. It's a lot of times you probably need to have built a pretty solid base to go over to doing that. Probably need to have built a solid base, and you might be better off doing some phases with speed. And I'm not saying you have to. You could certainly do exactly what you just described, which is what I do. And you might be very successful doing that. And I wouldn't have a problem with someone doing that. I just wouldn't say to someone to completely skip and never try speed work without seeing how you respond to it for a phase. Particularly if you're not explosive, right? Particularly if you're not explosive at all. In my case, I just need to be strong and I don't worry about it. Because I am just as good on max lifts if I pull them slow versus fast. And strong, not always particularly explosive. But I still did pretty well on speed work. So just throwing that out there. I wouldn't completely disregard it. But by that same token, look, if you just wanted to do it that way and you just said, well, I don't feel like I need it, I don't want to do it, I just want to go straight to the meat and potatoes, and it really is about maxes and then hypertrophy volume and accessory work, you could do that. And I think that really is kind of the core of the whole orc mode philosophy of what I put out. And I wouldn't have a problem with you doing that, even jokingly calling it the orc mode training, right? It'd be fine. I just wouldn't disregard and say don't do speed work just because you're not going to be an athlete. Now, if you're going to be an athlete, it's mandatory, right? It's mandatory. My opinion, says me. All right, next question and last question of the week. Shalom, Jason. Been thinking of setting up a padded pillar to support my sternum during pendlays, obviously at a height to be parallel to the floor. This should help to eliminate cheating and reduce low back fatigue a bit. Thoughts? Are you completely skipping all pendlay rows? Or you just need a day to where you need to reduce low back fatigue? Okay, because that's not a pendlay row anymore. It's now a chest supported row. Now, is that good for creating a strict movement? Sure. Sure. But here's the question I'm going to ask. What's going on with the low back? It shouldn't be the case of saying, well, I just want to reduce low back fatigue. Okay, that's fine. But are you doing any standing rowing? Are you training your back isometrically with any benefits from a standing row? You might want to do both. Now, are there cases to where you don't want the low back fatigue? Sure. I have clients who I make pendlay row 4 days a week, by the way, because they need the extra isometrics in their low back and they need the upper and middle back. Okay, they need all of it. Now, what am I doing in my case? I do inverted rows on the upper body days, but I still do the pendlays on lower body days. When everything is fatigued, I've done good mornings and stuff first. Why? Well, because I've already created fatigue in those areas and I want to train it isometrically. Now, I did have a client, one of my first clients early on, who he did let go over to chest supported rows even on his squat or deadlift days when he felt that he just didn't have the low back stamina to handle it. But what I also found with him doing that is that sometimes he didn't progress as well as we wanted on the squat and the deadlift accordingly. So what I'm going to say here is that this is very, very nuanced. Are you having to do this because you don't have work capacity in your low back, right? Is it because you've genuinely fatigued your low back or it needs days off because you're doing a lot of rowing? Like if you're doing rowing 4 days a week, I get it. Okay, I absolutely get it. You're going to have days where you want to let that low back rest. But if you're doing it because you just don't have work capacity in your erectors, and you don't have that isometric strength, then this is a bad idea because you're not going to develop it. This is a tool to help you develop those things. You need to start doing more high rep good mornings and other stuff to build your work capacity. So realistically, this is a question that we cannot accept in a vacuum. This needs to be looked at in the context of your greater training. do you actually need that? Because if you're saying, well, my low back is just too fatigued after deadlifting to do these, well, that's a work capacity problem that you need to fix. Now, if you're doing it on a day because you have days where you just don't want your low back to be trained because you're only doing upper body, like a bench press day, and you've already done a ton of work for the low back and it needs to rest, it makes sense in that context. So it's a very, very context dependent question. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.